Hello, welcome back to my channel. And welcome to my very petite, very tiny 56 book unhaul. I have been collecting these books in a box in my closet for far too long, and I figured it was time to show you guys these books before I part with them. I don't know how juicy this is going to be, I just know that I personally love watching book unhauls. I like to know why people are getting rid of books just as much as I like to know why people are buying books. I don't know how exciting this is going to be just because I feel like the reasons that I'm getting rid of a lot of these books are not that exciting, but if you just want to turn this on while you eat lunch or something, that's like what I'm here for. I'm here to just be some like good background noise for you. So without further ado, let's get into the unhaul portion of this video, and I will tell you about all of the books that I'm getting rid of and why I'm getting rid of them. So first up, I'm sure you could see it right here. I have Cemetery Boys by Aiden Thomas. You're gonna see kind of a recurring theme here. There are a lot of young adult, like contemporary or young adult fantasy books that I'm getting rid of, the ones that are like borderline fantasy, I guess. And that is primarily because it's just not a genre that I tend to reread a lot, and I feel like if I want to enjoy this story again, I will probably pick it up on audio. That's actually how I consumed this story whenever I picked it up for my YA fantasy reading vlog, and I had a really good time with audiobook version, so I don't think if I want to read this again that I will want to read it physically. And I've also noticed whenever I go to my local half-price books, that's where I'm going to resell most of these books, at least the ones that are not ARCs. I've noticed that when I go to my local half-price books, they don't really have a lot of newer titles besides like, you know, the ACOTAR books and things like that. They tend to be like older, like 2008-ish YA books. And while that's not necessarily like bad, I would love to see, you know, kind of more current titles on the shelves for teens. So this one I'm gonna go ahead and resell. Next up is Clap When You Land by Elizabeth Acevedo. I really enjoyed the story. I thought it was really excellent, but again, this is one that I will probably pick up on audio if I want to reread, and it's another one that I've never actually seen in like a half-price books. So again, I would love to be able to sell this to them and hopefully have like a teen be able to pick this one up. Next up is one that I'm not reselling because I want teens to read it. It's because I thought it was kind of boring, and that is The Darkest Star by JLA. I don't hate Jennifer L. Armentrout's writing. I just have not had the best luck with her books. I think I've read this, I've read the ones that are popular right now from Blood and Ash, A Kingdom of Flesh and Fire, and then I think like Half-Blood, the Vampire Academy ripoff, and like her writing's fine. It's just I've never read a book of hers that was really like anything more than a 3.5 star, and I know that I am not going to reread this because I don't even really remember what this was about. It's a spin-off of the Lux series, which is not one that I actually ended up reading when I was a teen. I think I was like past that age group, or it was like a little bit after my time, I guess. Yeah, I'm not gonna miss this book. Another book I'm not gonna miss is Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children. I feel kind of weird unhauling this because it's actually my sister's book, but I know that she wouldn't miss it either. This is one that I read for a taste test, and I'm glad that I got the opportunity to finally read this popular book. I had a good time reading it, to be honest. I thought it was interesting, but I'm not gonna carry on with the series, and in general, again, like YA is so hit or miss for me. I tend to only really enjoy YA paranormal or YA high fantasy at this point, so this is not something that I feel like I would revisit. Next up, okay, Call Me By Your Name by Andre Ossaman. I picked this up from a local indie bookstore right when the movie came out because I was like, oh, you know, like maybe I'll read the book and then watch the movie. I never watched the movie, I've never read the book, and I just don't think that it's something I really have interest in anymore. I really don't tend to like literary romance, if that makes sense, or literary fiction books that have like a romance at the heart. I feel like they're never done in a way that I enjoy, and there's just a lot of controversy surrounding this book and this movie, and I don't know, I don't have the interest that I used to have in consuming this, so I'd rather sell this, and maybe, you know, someone who would enjoy this will pick it up. Next up are a matching pair. We have Serpent and Dove and Blood and Honey by Shelby Mahurin. I think I have the dust jacket somewhere. I know some of you guys are probably going to ask that. I do have a big Sterilite bucket full of dust jackets for books that I know for sure I'm not going to keep, or like I haven't read yet, and I'm pretty sure I still have this dust jacket because I was kind of sure that I wasn't going to keep it. Anyway, I just didn't love these. I thought they were fine. I think I gave them both 3 stars. Perfectly like serviceable YA fantasy. If you really want a YA fantasy with some like steamy scenes, I guess these could work. I just feel like at that point, why not pick up an actual romance, because these don't have the same appeal. I don't know. I feel like if you enjoyed these, maybe pick up those JLA books that are super popular, because I think you're going to get a little bit more like payoff than these ones. But I know that these are 2 popular books. I know that these will get bought up super quickly at half-price books, so I am not sad that I'm saying bye to these, and if I want to consume the story, say it with me, I'm going to pick it up on audiobook, so goodbye to these. Next up is sort of a weird one, because I don't think I've ever read anything remotely like this on my channel. Watchmen, the graphic novel slash comic. This is something that I picked up because I had interest in comics and graphic novels kind of right when I started BookTube, and it's not that I don't enjoy sequential art at this point. I do find it fascinating, and there are some titles that I do still pick up, but I just don't think that this is a story that I would particularly enjoy. It's really long too, and it's really heavy on the story aspect. I tend to prefer a lot more like picture storytelling in my comics and graphic novels, probably because I already do so much novel reading, but this just isn't something that I think is really gonna strike my fancy. It was something that I picked up because it was on one of those like best of lists, but it's not something that I have interest in reading anymore. How many times can I say that? Okay, getting rid of this. Next up is one that sort of physically pains me because it took me so long to find a physical copy of this book, and it was one that I anticipated loving because I had like started it before I even bought a copy, and sadly it ended up just being a 3-star read for me, and that is City of Brass by S.A. Chakraborty. I wanted to love this. I didn't love this. I have a whole reading vlog where I read this and 2 other adult fantasies, and this one was by far the most disappointing, which sucks because I feel like on paper this was definitely the one that I thought I was going to enjoy the most, but sadly this is just not a story that really resonated with me, and I feel like if I ever feel the urge or the pull to read this again, I'm just going to pick up the audiobook because it is actually fantastic. I'm going to say that a lot for these books, that I would pick them up on audio, you know, if I don't have a physical copy, and that is true, but this one truly, like, I do think that the audiobook version is the superior way to consume this story, so yeah, I'm sad to be letting this go because it is so beautiful and it took me so long to find a hardcover copy of this, but it just wasn't my perfect adult fantasy. Next up, we have The Black Witch by Laurie Forrest. This is just an example of a book that I bought kind of for a video, or like a vague video idea that I had that I just decided against doing. I picked this up because I had heard like very mixed reviews about this book, and I wanted to maybe do a video where I read books that had very mixed reviews or were kind of controversial, and the more research I did for this video and in looking into titles, I just realized I didn't really have actual interest in the content of the books, so it was like, why even bother picking them up, I guess. This one's kind of no exception. This sort of fantasy is just not something that I tend to pick up anymore, and YA fantasy, I mean YA in general, is hard for me to pick up, or hard to get me to pick up. I don't know, this is a story that didn't even catch my eye when it was popular, so I know that I'm not gonna read this. Next up, we have these 4 books by Robert Galbraith, aka J.K. Rowling. I enjoyed the first 2 books in this series, I really did. I liked the slow burn romance element, but to be honest, I don't really care for J.K. Rowling anymore, as she is transphobic, but also the stories really declined in quality as the series went on. I think I only read the first 2, maybe the first 3 in this series. I know I never read Lethal White. Just no interest in reading these, so I'm gonna go ahead and get rid of these, and I don't know, I just feel like there's much better mystery out there, and there's definitely much better books with slow burn romance in them, so yeah, no reason to keep these. Next up, we have The Girl That the Sea Gave Back by Adrienne Young. This is the author of that one Viking ebook. I think I might have it somewhere. I heard terrible things about this, so I really have no interest in it. Again, it's one of those YA fantasies that doesn't really appeal to me because it says sea, and I don't really enjoy books set at sea. I think that this one's not necessarily set at sea. How many times can I say sea? I'm just gonna get rid of this book. Next up is A Discovery of Witches by Deborah Harkness. I know that they've made this into a TV show, and I feel like, honestly, that's probably the better way to consume this story, because I cannot tell you how many times I've picked this up and just not gotten very far. I feel like everybody has 1 or 2 of those books on their shelves. They're like, I will get to this one day because everybody loves it. And that's how I feel about this one. I really didn't hear that much about this book until I got onto BookTube, and there are a few people who really, really like this series, and I kept it on my shelves because I was like, okay, yeah, like, I'll read it eventually, and I just keep picking it up, getting a couple chapters in, and not being invested. It really is, to be honest, just like a pretentious, slightly adult Twilight. That's kind of the vibes I got from it, and I personally just have no space for like that sort of vibe and or like pretentiousness. If I want a paranormal romance, I'm just gonna go to like a paranormal romance, not this, which I think is trying to be too many things, I guess. I don't know. I don't know if that's making any sense, but I'm not gonna read this, so I'm gonna get rid of it. Next up, we have Full Dark No Stars by Stephen King. I don't know how to feel about Stephen King, to be honest. I have not read any of his books, and I feel like if I was going to read one of his books, it would not be this one. This is like a collection of, I believe, 4 different short stories, and I bought this because it was on clearance for $2 from Half Price Books, and I think back to Half Price Books is where it belongs. Next up is an indie book. I think this is the only indie that I'm getting rid of, and it's simply because I have 2 copies of it, and that is The Guy on the Right by Kate Stewart. So I don't need 2 copies, and since I never see indies at my local half-price books, I'm always happy to sell back indies just because I would love to find an indie romance one day on my shelves. Next is another YA contemporary, and it is The 5 Stages of Andrew Brawley by Sean David Hutchinson. I did not have very much luck with the 2 books that I did read of his, so I don't think this is something that really interests me. This is one that I got mega cheap from like thrift books or something. I was like, oh, I'm just gonna collect his backlist. Even before I had even read any of his books. I'm very dumb. And then I read his books and realized they weren't for me, so I'm gonna go ahead and get rid of like the 1 remaining book that I have of his. Next might be shocking to some of you guys who enjoy this author, but it shouldn't be shocking if you have seen any of my reviews of her books. I'm getting rid of Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I know everybody loves this book and or loves this author, but I just don't. I mean, there's no other like way to put it. I think she does a really good job at what she does. It just, her writing doesn't connect with me personally. I feel like it tends to be a little too, here's the point instead of leading you to the point. And that kind of writing style just doesn't work for me. I don't really like super quotable writing. And I also find her characters quite insufferable. I understand that they're supposed to be unlikable, but they're so unlikable that I just can't enjoy the stories. So this is one that I'm gonna get rid of, and if I ever want to read it again, I actually have purchased the audiobook copy, so I can go and listen to it anytime I please. So I'm gonna get rid of this. Next up is God's Grave by Jay Kristoff. I have all of these books in the UK hardcover, so I don't need this one. And frankly, I might get rid of those at some point too, because I haven't read them, and the more time goes on, the less inclined I am to read them. Nothing against the story or anything, I just don't think it's something I really am into. I'm not super into revenge stories. They tend to not really resonate with me, so I'm gonna get rid of this one. Next up is a book that I probably should have paired with the other book that I'm getting rid of by this author. That's Escaping from Houdini by Carrie Maniscalco. I read Stalking Jack the Ripper last year, I read Kingdom of the Wicked this year, and I didn't enjoy either of those books, so it feels like high time to get rid of the sequel. This is another one that I was like, I'm gonna love Carrie Maniscalco. She's controversial, not controversial, but only some people like her books. Her books tend to be very hit or miss for people, but I, for some reason, thought that I was going to be one of those people who thought her books were a hit, so I was like, I'm just going to pick up all of her books, and thankfully I read the first one before I got past purchasing the first 2 books in the series. I think there's like 4 or 5, because I just didn't enjoy either of those books at all, Stalking Jack the Ripper or Kingdom of the Wicked, so I'm going to get rid of the sequel, and I know someone will be overjoyed to find this at half price. Oh, speaking of, I just found it. Kingdom of the Wicked. Getting rid of this. Really didn't enjoy it. If you want to see my thoughts on this book, I have a whole vlog where I read 5 YA fantasies that are like super popular, so if you want my thoughts, I've got very detailed thoughts over there. Mostly me just complaining for like, I think 10 minutes straight. Yeah, this was very disappointing, and I'm gonna stick to adult paranormal when I want that sort of vibe. Next is a book that I did enjoy, but I don't think I'm going to reread, and that is These Violent Delights by Chloe Gong. I ended up giving this book like 3.5 or 4 stars. I did enjoy it, but for me, what separates like a 5-star read from a 4-star is, would I reread this, and is this like kind of all-time favorite material? And this just wasn't for me. Something about the ending was just a little lackluster. I did love the setting of the story, but I feel like because the setting was so beautiful, this would lend itself really well to listening on audio again. I did listen to it on audio for like half of the reading experience, and it was quite lovely. So I feel like if I'm gonna reread this and like read the sequel at some point, it's gonna be on audio. So I'm gonna go ahead and part ways with this. I hope someone really is excited when they see this in half price, because again, I don't think I've ever seen this book there. Next up is Landline by Rainbow Rowell. This is one that I've tried multiple times to get into, and I just can't seem to get past the first couple of chapters, which sort of surprises me because I think this is a story about a married couple, which tends to be something that I'm into when it comes to like chick lit / contemporary romance, but I don't know, this just didn't work for me, and I didn't really like the concept of them like maintaining their relationship via some magical phone. I know that's like silly, but this just, the plot, the quirks, whatever, just, it's not something that really interests me. Next up is a controversial one, not controversial, but I know everybody enjoys this book, and I just didn't. It is Betrayed by Emily Henry. I know this is everybody's darling. I got it from Book of the Month and I was so excited about it, but sadly this was just like a 3-star for me. I liked elements of this book, but this is just not my ideal adult romance. I need a little bit more fun. I need a little bit less anger sadness. I don't know. I don't really know what to say. It didn't connect with me. It didn't resonate. We're getting rid of it. Next up is another book from kind of like a failed video idea. I might do it at some point. I kind of forgot about this until I looked at this book. It's The Glittering Court by Rochelle Mead. I was going to read the, I think, lowest rated books on my TBR. No, I already did that. Actually, now that I'm looking at this, I actually have no idea what this book was for. I think it was for some sort of video like that, like reading the lowest rated books on my TBR or reading books that no one likes from popular authors, or I don't know. I'm sure the idea was convoluted because I don't have it on my like master list of video ideas anymore, but I have no interest in reading this, which is sad because I love Rochelle Mead, but the reviews for this book and this series are just so blah. It kind of reminds me of the reviews that I've seen for The Selection, which I also haven't read and kind of have no interest in, so I'm just gonna get rid of this. Okay, next up is a book that I know that I've actually gotten rid of the dust jacket for because I thought that I was gonna keep this book forever. I thought it was gonna be something I reread, but the longer that I am away from initially reading this book, the more that I don't think I would ever reread it, and that is Leah on the Offbeat by Becky Albertalli. I kind of feel like when I read this book, I wanted to have a different opinion than everyone else, and so I was like, this is a 5-star, this is so relatable, and I kind of get where I was coming from in some regards, but I also think that Leah was just beyond unlikable and very selfish at points, and I think that is, you know, true for some people's high school experience and their experience of like coming to terms with their identity and like finding someone they like, whatever, but I just didn't love some of her actions. I don't think this is something I'm gonna reread, and there's so many queer stories coming out right now in YA that I feel like I would enjoy more, so I'm gonna get rid of this one. Hopefully someone will connect with it, but this is just not one that I think I want to keep on my shelves. This is a book that I've had on my shelves probably the longest of most of these books. I got this before I started BookTube, I believe. I could be wrong. You could have seen this in a haul. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure I got this before I started BookTube. And it is Roar by Cora Carmack. This is kind of, I don't even know how to describe this. It gives me very big fairy tale vibes, and it has some stuff to do with elements. That's all I really remember from the little bit that I've read of this. It's one of those books kind of like another one that I have right here, like Truth Witch, where I feel like I heard a lot of stuff right when these books came out, but then I heard kind of like mixed reviews, or the series wasn't that great as it carried on, and I just never really had any interest in carrying on, or in even reading the first book. Like, I never read Truth Witch, and I never read Roar, and I feel like someone out there is going to enjoy these books, but I just don't think they're for me at this point. I think the concepts are interesting. I think this one also might have some sort of like elemental magic to it, but I don't know. They just don't appeal to me so much anymore, and I know that a teen out there would probably enjoy these books more than I would. Which is something that I can also say for these next 3 books. I have a Sorrow Fierce and Falling, a Shadow Bright and Burning, and a Poison Dark and Drowning by Jessica Cluess. Tried reading the first book a while ago, and I was like, oh, I'll enjoy this. This is fun. I read like the first 3 chapters. I got distracted, never picked it up again, and I was like, you know, the other 2 are super cheap on Book Outlet. This was a couple years ago. I'm gonna go and get these, and I never read them. I'm probably never going to read these. I have a couple of other YA fantasy trilogies that I have not read on my shelves that I would probably like to read more than these ones, so I'm just gonna go ahead and get rid of these. Next up is a book that I've had for a really fucking long time, to be honest, and it is Bared to You by Sylvia Day. I bought this book because I thought it was gonna be another 50 Shades, and that was like all I knew at the time when it came to romance. I've come so far. This was like, I don't know, I feel like I read this right when it came out, maybe 2012 probably, and I ended up keeping this book, and it came in handy because I had to read it again for a video that I did. The video was fun and I had a good time, but I don't want to keep this particular book anymore. I just, meh. It was honestly kind of more irritating than 50 Shades in a lot of ways because the heroine is rich and not in like a fun way, you know? Kind of like an eat the rich sort of way. So I'm just gonna get rid of this. Next up we have Heretics Anonymous by Katie Henry. This is a book that I read for a taste test. This is a book that I had on my shelves for a while. This is a book that I heard a lot of great things about, and it was just okay for me. It was a 3-star. I just feel like this sort of YA contemporary is something that I would have loved as a teen, but as an adult it just doesn't have the same impact, and that's totally okay because guess what? This is not written for me. Yeah, someone will probably really enjoy this. I think it has interesting and maybe relatable like teen commentary on religion, but as an adult I just kind of like didn't relate or care that much, so I'm gonna go ahead and get rid of this. Next up, I have 2 copies of this book. One is an ARC and one is a just like finished copy. I have the Happy Ever After playlist by Abby Jimenez. The ARC copy I'm gonna put in a little free library near my house, and the finished copy I am going to sell to my local used bookstore. This was fine. It wasn't really my favorite book. I liked it better than The Friend Zone by Abby Jimenez, but it didn't really speak to me in the way that I thought that it was going to. it is kind of a hard-hitting adult contemporary about grief, and I feel like I've read so many of those recently. I'm glad that I had these because I did actually end up having to read this for a video that's coming out soon, but I just know that this is a book that I'm not going to revisit. So I'm gonna go ahead and part ways with both of these copies. Next up we have In a Holidays by Christina Lauren. This was fine. I think I gave it 3 stars, maybe 2 stars. To be honest, now that I'm thinking about it, I don't really remember how this book ended. I don't know, I have not been super impressed with Christina Lauren's offerings recently, and that's sad because I like some of their earlier work, but this is just not for me, and maybe it'll be for someone else, but it's just not for me. If you want my actual thoughts on this book, it will be coming mid-April, so look forward to that. Okay, next up, I'm gonna do these in rapid succession because I don't know much about these books. I went to Book Expo in 2019 and I was so excited to get ARCs that I kind of just took whatever was offered to me. And a lot of these books are just not things that I would have picked up on my own, and I think if I put these in a little free library, people will really like these. So I have Thrill Like a Girl by Sarah Henning. I think this is like a YA contemporary romance. It does look really cute, but I don't really pick up YA contemporaries anymore, so this is just not something that I think I'm gonna get to. Next I have Followers by Megan Angelo. This is one that I held on to for a really long time. It's an art copy as well, primarily because I thought, oh, kind of seems like something I'd like, but honestly, the more I look at it, the more that I know that this isn't going to be like a romance or anything, and I think it's gonna fall into that kind of borderline chick lit category that I just don't really personally gravitate towards. I'm gonna go ahead and get rid of this. Same with Fireborn by Rosario Munda and Jackpot by Nick Stone. These are 2 books that weren't really on my radar before Book Expo, and I think other readers would enjoy more than I would. I know a lot of people say they love dragons and stories, and I feel like I might have said that when I first got this book, but I don't really care about dragons very much, so I don't think this is for me. And then Jackpot by Nick Stone, I don't really know that much about, but I do know it's a YA contemporary, and it takes a lot for me to pick up YA contemporaries, even more so than a YA fantasy, so I'm gonna go ahead and part ways with both of these. Next is Supermarket by Bobby Hall, aka Logic. I just don't really have much interest in this. I have a friend that read this and absolutely hated it, which kind of colors my judgment. I'm glad that I got to receive a copy of this. Really honored to get an ARC. I think this is one of my first, and this isn't an ARC, this is a finished copy, but this is one of the first books that I was ever solicited to about, I guess, was asked to read or was sent a copy of, whatever. And I was super excited about it at the time, but as time has passed, I just don't really have a ton of interest in reading this book, so I'm gonna pass it along to someone who would enjoy it more. Next, I have The Map from Here to There by Emery Lord. I think this is the second book, or no, I think it's the second book in a series. I think the first book was supposed to be a standalone, but Emery Lord decided to just make a follow-up book, and a lot of people were excited about it. I just don't really read YA contemporary, so I'm gonna go ahead and get rid of this. A book that I was interested in, and now that I'm looking at it, I may or may not keep it just because the cover is so cool, is Hollow Kingdom by Kira Jane Buxton. I actually think this, nope, it's not a finished copy. It looks like it, but it's not. This is an ARC, and it's personalized to me. I was excited to get this one because I know it's supposed to be sort of a weird horror-esque book, but I just don't tend to pick stuff up like this very often, if ever, so I feel like someone else would really, really enjoy this, so I'm gonna go ahead and get rid of it. Next is an ARC that I actually have read, and it is All-American Muslim Girl by Nadine Jolie Courtney. This is one that I got at Book Expo as well, and it was one of those situations where you walk up and you tell them your most favorite story or whatever, and they recommend you a book based off of that or give you an ARC based off of that, and they gave me this one, and I really enjoyed this. I think I gave this 4 stars. I read this for a backlist readathon blog or something like that. It was a really good story, but I think it would be kind of a shame for me to hold on to something like this when I feel like this could be something that someone would really, really love, and that's kind of how I feel about a lot of ARCs. I would have liked to see this go to a Muslim reviewer instead of me. I mean, I was just, they handed it to me, right? I couldn't have decided who got it, but yeah, I'm sad that this wasn't put in the hands of someone who could maybe more accurately speak to the representation and stuff like that. I'm gonna go ahead and get rid of this, put it in my little free library, and hopefully someone will be super excited to pick this title up. Next up is the first ARC that I ever got a physical copy of, and it kind of breaks my heart to get rid of it, but I also know that I didn't ever get past a couple of chapters in this book, so there's no use really in keeping it, and that is #Fashion Victim by Amina Akhtar. I just feel like someone else will really connect with the story, The idea behind it is really cool, but I just didn't connect with the writing for this, so I'm gonna go ahead and get rid of this. The next arc is one that I was passed along by a friend, and I actually ended up really enjoying the story, but I don't think it's one that I am going to reread, and that is Girls of Paper and Fire by Natasha and Young. Like I said, I really did enjoy this, but the more I heard about the sequel, the less inclined I was to pick it up, and that is simply because I think the second book focuses more on war, and I felt like this worked really well as a standalone. And you're probably thinking like, okay, well, if you liked it, you feel like it would work as a standalone, why would you keep it? For me, I just know that I'm not going to reread this book, and if I do want to read this book, I'm going to pick it up on audio. I think honestly that is actually how I ended up consuming this story. I read along as I listened, and I just feel like someone else could really enjoy this story. It's really important representation. We've got two Asian main characters, and there's a sapphic romance at the heart of the story. I just feel like I would love to see someone pick this up who could feel really seen by this book, so I am kind of sad to part ways with this arc, but at the same time, I feel like this could definitely be a book that really speaks to someone, so I'm gonna go ahead and put this in my little free library. Next up is a book that I kind of debated selling just because I really did enjoy the story, and that is The Complete Persepolis by Marjane Satrapi. I really liked this. I felt like it was a super important story, but nonfiction like this is not something that I tend to revisit. It's something that I feel like I get really invested in. I do research about the topics at hand as I'm reading. I feel like I get really immersed, but I just don't think it's something that I really am going to get a whole ton of value in if I read it again. And that's how I feel about most books, but especially nonfiction, I feel like it's almost like a textbook. I mean, it wasn't like a textbook, and I specifically said that in my vlog, just that, you know, it didn't feel like a textbook, but in the way that you are consuming the knowledge in these sorts of stories, it just doesn't feel like something I'm gonna need to revisit. I don't know why I'm trying to like really explain this, but you guys know what I'm saying, right? And this is one that I feel like is required reading for a lot of people for different classes, especially like college classes. I feel like if I were a college student going into a half price books and found this used copy and needed it for a class, I'd be super, super happy, so I'm gonna go ahead and part ways. Next up, we have The Witch Doesn't Burn in this one by Amanda Lovelace. I didn't really enjoy this personally. I enjoyed her first collection of poetry more than this one, and I just feel like poetry is a really personal thing, so I'm gonna go ahead and get rid of this, and hopefully someone will feel really connected to these poems when they pick this up. Now, the last 5 books that I have are all romances, and I'm getting rid of them for different reasons, so buckle in for these last 5 books. So the first book is The Honey Don't List by Christina Lauren. This was actually an ARC that I received, and when I got the message about this, I was honestly in shock. I was like, why would you want me to have a copy of this? I'm not cool enough to get a copy of this book, but sadly, it just didn't really work out for me. I wanted to love this so much because I like that whole fixer-upper HGTV vibe, but the two romances, I guess, at the heart of the story, or the two couples, I didn't connect with either of them. The kind of falling apart marriage was just sad, and the romance that blossomed between the two assistants, it was just kind of lackluster for me. I wanted more there. I wanted more focus on their relationship that just never happened, so this was just kind of meh for me, and it was so disappointing because I was so excited about it. But you win some, you lose some, and I'll always think of this book with fond memories just because I was lucky enough to receive an ARC for it, but I'm hoping that by putting this in my little free library, someone will have a really good book to read by the pool this summer. Next up, we have One to Watch by Kate Stayman London. I really, really liked this book, but I just feel like if I'm gonna read this book again, I'm gonna pick up the audiobook version of it. This is another one too that I feel like I just don't see enough books like this in my half-price books. I feel like you've got a lot of 50 Shades, a lot of Bared to You, and a lot of historical romance, but I don't see a ton of these new contemporary romances with really diverse representation in them. I really feel like that's important, and I want to see this on the shelves of even used bookstores, so I'm gonna go ahead and donate this. And again, if I ever want to reread this, which I probably will because I did really enjoy the story, I'm gonna go ahead and pick this up on audio. Next up is a book that I feel like I told you guys recently I was going to keep, but upon further reflection, I feel like I just loved the audiobook version so much that I can't see myself physically reading this, and that is Ties That Tether by Jane Agaro. I read this for a recent video. I really, really enjoyed the story. I loved the cultural aspects of it, and I really liked the romance, but I actually have such fond memories of listening to this. I did a lot of yard work as I finished this book, and I know that sounds really silly, but I just had such like a good time listening while I was doing that I have fond memories about this book, probably more fond memories than I would had I not done yard work while I listened to it. I know that sounds so stupid, but I liked the audiobook so much. I honestly might buy the audiobook version because I liked it so much. Anyway, I'm gonna get rid of the physical copy, but I did enjoy this and I do recommend it. And then we come to our last two books. I saved the best books, or I guess worst books, for last. They should come as no surprise to anyone who's been watching my channel for any length of time because I didn't enjoy either of these. First up, we have Pretending by Holly Bourne. This book made me like pretty viscerally angry. I talk about it more in that vlog, which I may or may not link in the description if I can remember. But this just, I don't know who the audience for this book is. It was just so graphic with the sexual assaults. The romance at the heart of the story was not really a romance. I don't really know what the story was for. I'm gonna get rid of it. And then lastly, it's finally time to say goodbye to In 5 Years by Rebecca Searle. I hate this book with every fiber of my being, every piece of my soul. So excited to finally just part ways. I feel like my spirit's going to lift when I sell this back to Half Price Books, to be honest. It just didn't work for me in any regard, but I know a lot of you guys did enjoy it, so maybe one of you guys will be lucky enough to find a copy at my Half Price Books. That is it though. Those are the 56, 55, I don't know. I'm putting 56 in the title because I counted once and that's good enough. The 56 books that I'm getting rid of. If you stayed this long, thank you. I feel like this video was extremely long for no reason, but hopefully you enjoyed me rambling and chatting. I have more exciting content coming that is of value to someone unlike this. But thanks so much for watching. I love you guys so much, and until next Sunday.